I never should have left my phone in the car that day. But thank God I did, because the dash cam caught everything. My mother-in-law leaning across the seat, telling my wife that she'd hired a private investigator who discovered I had another wife and child in Portland. "He's living a double life, sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "I have the photos to prove it." What she didn't know was that the man in those photos wasn't me, and that I'd catch their entire conversation on camera. "No, before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." My name is Daniel Cooper, 34 years old, software engineer at a growing tech startup in Seattle. 6 years ago, I met Emma at a friend's housewarming party. She was brilliant, compassionate, with a laugh that made everyone around her smile. Within a year, we were married, and for the most part, life was everything I'd hoped for. Everything except my relationship with her parents, particularly her mother, Patricia. From day one, Patricia made it clear I wasn't the man she'd envisioned. For her daughter, Emma came from a family with old Seattle money. Her father, Richard, was a retired corporate attorney who now managed their considerable family investments. They lived in a sprawling waterfront home on Mercer Island, belonged to the right clubs, vacationed in the right places. Their vision for Emma had always been someone who matched their lifestyle, preferably the son of one of their country club friends, someone who understood their world. Instead, she brought home me, a software engineer from a middle-class family. In Michigan, my parents were teachers who saved all year for modest vacations. I'd put myself through college on scholarships and student loans. In Patricia's eyes, this made me perpetually inadequate, despite my successful career and our comfortable life. "When are you going to leave that little startup and join a real company?" she'd asked during Sunday brunches. "Microsoft is always hiring, and Richard knows several executives there." Emma would squeeze my hand under the table when her mother made these comments. "Mom, Daniel loves what he does. His company just secured another round of funding." Patricia would smile thinly. "Well, that's nice, dear, but startups are so unstable. Think about your future." This was the rhythm of our relationship with them. Richard was less obvious about his disapproval, often hiding behind his newspaper or suddenly remembering work calls when conversations grew tense. But he never contradicted his wife, which said everything. For years, I tried to win them over. I'd research topics Richard was interested in before family gatherings, bring expensive wine that I'd carefully selected, offer to help with their technology issues. Nothing changed. To them, I remained the unsuitable choice their daughter had made, a situation they seemed to believe was temporary. About 6 months ago, things began to shift. Patricia started calling Emma more frequently, often when she knew I'd be at work. Emma would be quieter after these calls, and when I'd ask what her mother wanted, she'd shrug it off as just mom stuff. Then Patricia began suggesting lunch dates, shopping trips, weekend visits without me. Just mother-daughter time, she'd insist. I didn't think much of it at first. Their relationship had always been close, if complicated. Emma had spent her life trying to please her parents while simultaneously forging her own path. These conflicting desires created a constant undercurrent of tension in her life, but I respected her need to maintain the relationship. The first real warning sign came 3 months ago when we were having dinner with her college friend Megan. After a few glasses of wine, Megan mentioned something about Patricia's concerns. "What concerns?" I asked, looking between them. Megan's eyes widened, realizing she'd said something she shouldn't have. "Oh, nothing specific, just that your mother-in-law worries a lot, about everything." Emma quickly changed the subject, but later that night I asked her directly, "Is your mother saying things about me to your friends?" Emma sighed, running her hand through her hair. "She's just being mom. You know how she is. She gets these ideas in her head and then can't let them go." What ideas exactly? It's nothing, Daniel, really. She's worried about my happiness. She doesn't understand that I am happy. I let it go, but something felt off. Over the next few weeks, I noticed small changes in Emma. She checked her phone more frequently when I was around. She asked casual questions about my work schedule, my meetings, who I was having lunch with. Once, I caught her looking through my email when I'd left my laptop open. "Just checking if that reservation went through," she said quickly, but I couldn't remember discussing any reservation. Then came the business trip to Portland. My company was partnering with a firm there, and I needed to spend 3 days meeting with their development team. Emma seemed unusually anxious about the trip. "Maybe I could come with you," she suggested the night before I was set to leave. "I'd love that, but I'll be in meetings all day, probably working late. It would be boring for you." She nodded, but looked disappointed. "Will you call me when you're done each day?" "Of course," I promised, confused by her intensity but attributing it to the growing distance I'd been feeling between us. The trip went well professionally, but each night when I called Emma, our conversations felt strained. She asked detailed questions about my day, where I'd eaten, who I'd met with. On the final evening, I was having dinner with our new partners, when my phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from Emma asking where I was and why I wasn't answering my phone, even though I'd told her about the dinner earlier. I returned home late Friday night to find Emma waiting up, looking exhausted. When I hugged her, she held on a little too tightly. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yes. I just missed you." The next morning, Patricia called and invited Emma for lunch. "Just us girls," I heard her say over the speakerphone. Emma agreed, shooting me an apologetic look. When she left, I decided to wash my car, a mundane weekend task that would become the most important decision I'd made in months. I keep a small dashcam mounted near my rearview mirror, something I'd installed after a fender bender the year before, where the other driver had tried to claim I was at fault. I normally don't think much about it, but as I was cleaning the interior, I noticed the SD card was nearly full. I popped it out, intending to clear off old footage, when I saw that it had recorded the day before while my car was parked in our driveway. I almost deleted it without watching, but something made me hesitate. Emma had borrowed my car yesterday while I was unpacking, saying she needed to pick up dry cleaning. Out of idle curiosity, I plugged the card into my laptop. What I saw froze the blood in my veins. The footage showed my car parked somewhere I didn't recognize, not our dry cleaner's lot. After a few minutes, the passenger door opened, and Patricia slid in beside Emma. "Did you bring them?" Emma asked. Patricia nodded, pulling an envelope from her purse. "My friend Mark took these. He's very discreet." The camera angle didn't show what was in the envelope, but Emma's sharp intake of breath was clearly audible. "This can't be real," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart." Patricia's voice oozed sympathy. I didn't want to believe it either, but Mark followed him in Portland. That's his other apartment. She seemed to be pointing at something, and that woman, according to neighbors, has been living with him off and on for over 2 years. The little boy is about 18 months old. Emma's hand came up to cover her mouth. "Daniel has a child, a son," Patricia confirmed, her tone grave, but with an unmistakable undercurrent of satisfaction. Mark spoke with the building manager. Daniel uses the name Daniel Wilson there. He visits about once a month, always when he claims to be on business. Trips. I felt physically ill, my head spinning as I tried to process what I was hearing. Another apartment, a woman and child. It was complete fiction, an elaborate lie being fed to my wife by her own mother. The footage continued, Patricia's voice both soothing and insistent as she laid out more evidence of my supposed double life, credit card charges, weekend trips I couldn't account for, even a second phone she claimed I kept hidden. "You've suspected something was wrong for months," Patricia reminded Emma. The late nights, the secretive calls, the Portland trips that keep multiplying. I never thought. Emma's voice broke. A whole other family? Men like Daniel, men from backgrounds like his, they often want to improve their station. In life, you gave him access to our world, our connections, but some men need more. They keep parts of themselves separate. I could barely breathe through my anger. The Portland trips had only started 2 months ago for a specific project. The secretive calls were likely when I stepped away to discuss a potential promotion I'd been hoping to surprise Emma with. Patricia had woven normal events of my life into a damning narrative that painted me as a calculating liar. "What should I do?" Emma asked, sounding lost. "Don't confront him yet," Patricia advised. "Men like this are prepared with excuses. We need more evidence, bank statements, phone records. I've invited you both to the lake house next weekend. Tell him you're visiting your aunt in Portland instead. We'll drive to the apartment while he thinks you're away. Catch him there." "I can't believe he would do this to me," Emma whispered. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." Patricia patted her hand. "I never wanted to be right about him, darling, but I've always sensed something wasn't quite right with Daniel. Too eager to please, too perfect. Now we know why." The recording continued for another 10 minutes with Patricia outlining their plan to expose me, including how Emma should behave until then. Act normal. Don't let on that she knows. Gather information. Then they exited the car, and the footage ended. I sat staring at my laptop screen long after. It went dark trying to make sense of what I'd witnessed. The level of calculation, the elaborate construction of lies, the deliberate manipulation of my wife's trust. It was staggering, and Emma had believed it all. The woman I loved, who knew me better than anyone, thought me capable of leading a double life, of fathering a child with another woman while married to her. That realization hurt more than Patricia's lies. I spent the rest of the day in a haze of anger and confusion, trying to decide what to do. By the time Emma returned home, her eyes red-rimmed despite obvious efforts with makeup, I'd come to a decision. I wouldn't confront her yet. I needed to understand how deep this deception went and who else might be involved. Was Richard part of this? Had they hired a real private investigator who fabricated evidence? Or was Mark just a convenient fiction? Most importantly, I needed to know why. Why would Patricia go to such extraordinary lengths to destroy our marriage? What was the end game? So I played along. For a week, I lived with a wife who thought I was betraying her in the most fundamental way possible. I watched her check my phone when she thought I wasn't looking, followed her subtle attempts to track my movements, felt the growing wall between us. Each night she'd curl away from me in bed, and I'd lie awake wondering who else she might be talking to about my imaginary infidelity. I took steps of my own. I installed recording apps on my phone to capture any conversations when I wasn't present. I set up cameras in our home office. I documented everything Patricia had claimed on the dashcam video and systematically gathered evidence to disprove each point. I contacted my company's travel department for records of my Portland trips. I pulled bank statements and phone records. The hardest part was pretending normalcy when I wanted to shake Emma and demand how she could believe such lies about me. But I kept reminding myself that Patricia had been laying this groundwork for months, skillfully playing on Emma's insecurities and the natural strains that come with any marriage. Thursday night, 3 days before our supposed trip to the lake house, I received a text from an unknown number. "Emma knows everything. Better come clean. A friend." I suspected Patricia, trying to provoke a reaction that would seem like an admission of guilt. I didn't respond. Friday morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Richard and Patricia's house, knowing both would be there. I needed answers before confronting Emma. Richard answered the door, surprised to see me. "Daniel," Aren't you supposed to be at work? We need to talk, I said, stepping past him into their meticulously decorated foyer. All of us. Patricia emerged from the kitchen, her expression shifting quickly from shock to controlled pleasantness. Daniel, what an unexpected surprise. Is everything all right? No, Patricia, everything is not all right, but then you already know that. Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. I'm not sure what you mean. I pulled out my phone and played a short clip from the dashcam video, just enough to show her and Emma in my car, Patricia saying, Daniel uses the name Daniel Wilson there. The color drained from her face. Richard looked between us. Confusion. Evident. What is this about? Your wife has been telling my wife that I have another family in Portland, a woman and a child. She's shown Emma fabricated photos, created elaborate stories about fake business trips, and convinced her that I'm living a double life. Richard turned to Patricia. Is this true? Of course not, she scoffed, but her voice lacked conviction. Emma has been suspicious of Daniel's behavior for months. I merely suggested she consider the possibility you hired someone named Mark to follow me, I interrupted. Except no one followed me because there's nothing to find. You made it all up. This is absurd, Patricia said, brushing invisible lint from her immaculate slacks. Emma came to me with concerns. I acted as any mother would. I played another clip, this one clearly showing Patricia saying, men like Daniel, men from backgrounds like his, they often want to improve their station in life. Richard's face had gone stony. Patricia, what have you done? Her composure finally cracked. I was protecting our daughter. He's never been right for her. You know it as well as I do, Richard. By inventing another wife and child? Richard looked genuinely shocked. This goes beyond disapproval, Patricia. He's going to hurt her eventually, Patricia insisted, her voice rising. I just accelerated the inevitable. Emma deserves someone from our world, someone who understands our values. Someone like James Harrison's son, I asked, remembering the name of a family they'd often mentioned. Patricia's eyes flashed. Bradley would have been perfect for her. He's respected, established. He's also married with 3 children. Richard cut in, his voice flat. Has been for years. There are others, Patricia said dismissively. Once Emma is free of this marriage, she'll see the possibilities. I felt oddly calm now that the truth was laid bare. You never intended to catch me in Portland with my non-existent second family, did you? That was just to get Emma to the lake house alone, so you could convince her to leave me. Patricia didn't deny it. You're not one of us, Daniel. You never will be. Emma was caught up in some romantic notion when she married you, but it's time she returned to reality. Richard sank into a chair, looking suddenly aged. I knew you had reservations about Daniel, but this is criminal, Patricia. Don't be dramatic, she snapped. I was protecting our daughter's future. By destroying her present, her trust? Richard shook his head. She loves him. She'll get over it, Patricia said with chilling certainty. They've only been married 6 years. No children yet, thankfully. There's still time for her to start over with someone suitable. The casual cruelty of her assessment left me speechless. 6 years of building a life together dismissed as a youthful detour that needed correction. Richard turned to me. I had no knowledge of this, Daniel. None. I believed him. Richard had always been distant, but never actively hostile. His sin was passivity, not malice. What happens now? Patricia asked, a hint of defiance returning. You'll tell Emma she'll be upset for a while, but eventually she'll see I had her best interests at heart. You really believe that? I couldn't hide my disbelief. I know my daughter, Patricia said firmly. Family loyalty runs deep. I left their house with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. I now understood exactly what I was dealing with. Not just disapproval or snobbery, but a calculated campaign to end my marriage. Patricia genuinely believed she was rescuing her daughter from a mistake. In her mind, the pain she caused was necessary and temporary. When I got home, I found Emma sitting in our kitchen, staring at her phone. She looked up, startled to see me in the middle of the day. "You're supposed to be at work," she said, "and you're supposed to trust me," I replied quietly. Her face paled. "What?" I sat across from her and placed my phone on the table between us. "I know what your mother told you. About Portland, about the woman and child I supposedly have there. I know about the photos, the private investigator, all of it." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "How?" "My dash cam recorded your conversation in my car last week." She looked away, shame and conflict evident in her expression. "Daniel, before you say anything, I need you to watch something." I pressed play on a compilation video I'd prepared showing the dashcam footage, followed by Patricia's admission at her house earlier, interspersed with evidence disproving every claim. My company's travel records, bank statements, phone logs. Emma watched in silence, tears streaming down her face. When it ended, she covered her face with her hands. "I don't know what to say." "You believed I could do that to you," I said, the hurt finally breaking through my composed exterior. "You thought I could live a double life, father a child with another woman, lie to your face every day." "She had photos," Emma whispered, "of you with a woman and child entering an apartment building. Photos of someone who looked like me. Did you really look at them? Was it actually me?" She hesitated. "It was from a distance, but it looked like you, your build, your walk, and she had evidence, credit card statements, phone records, fabricated, all of it." I pushed back from the table, suddenly, needing space. "What hurts most is how easily you believed it. 6 years together, and all it took was some photos of a stranger who resembles me to convince you I'm living a lie." Emma stared at her hands. "It wasn't that simple. For months she's been planting doubts, little comments about your late nights, questions about why you were so secretive about your Portland trips. Trips that only started 2 months ago for a specific project," I reminded her. "Late nights working on a promotion I wanted to surprise you with." "I know that now," she said miserably, "but she's my mother. I never thought she would. Deliberately destroy our marriage? That's exactly what she was trying to do. She admitted it today." Emma looked up, fresh shock on her face. "You confronted her?" "This morning. Your father was there too. He didn't know about any of it. And she admitted it, just like that." "She doesn't think she did anything wrong, Emma. In her mind, she was saving you from a mistake. She expected you'd be angry temporarily, but would eventually thank her for freeing you to find someone more suitable." Emma pushed back from the table so violently her chair tipped over. "That's insane. Who does she think she is?" "A mother protecting her daughter's future," I said, repeating Patricia's words. "Apparently, 6 years of marriage is just a phase you need to outgrow." Emma paced our kitchen, anger replacing shame. "I can't believe she would do this. Actually, that's not true. I can believe it. She's always thought she knows what's best for me. Always." She stopped suddenly, turning to face me. "Daniel, I am so sorry. I should have trusted you. I should have talked to you when she first started suggesting things. Why didn't you?" She sank onto a bar stool. "Because part of me was afraid she might be right." That admission hung between us, painful in its honesty. "Not about you having another family," she clarified hurriedly. "I never really believed that until she showed me those photos. But about us being too different, about me making a choice my family couldn't accept. Every holiday, every dinner with them, it's been this undercurrent. That I chose wrong, that eventually it would catch up to us. I understood then that the damage Patricia had done went beyond her recent deception. For years, she'd been nurturing doubts in Emma's mind, subtle comments and questions designed to undermine our foundation. "What do we do now?" Emma asked. It was a question that required more consideration than I could give in that moment. What do you do when your mother-in-law fabricates evidence of infidelity, when your spouse believes it, when 6 years of marriage proves more fragile than you'd ever imagined? "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But we can't go back to how things were." Emma nodded, wiping her tears. "I'll call her, tell her I know everything, and then, she took a deep breath. "Then we decide how, or if, they're going to be part of our lives going forward." We spent the weekend talking, really talking, in a way we hadn't for months. Emma called her parents, a conversation that ended with her hanging up after telling her mother not to contact either of us again until she could acknowledge the harm she'd caused. Richard called separately, apologizing profusely and asking how he could make things right. "Give us time," Emma told him. "This isn't something that can be fixed with an apology." As for us, the path forward wasn't immediately clear. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend easily, but we committed to counseling, to rebuilding what Patricia had tried to destroy. 3 months later, we're still working through it. Emma has had minimal contact with her parents, occasional texts with her father, silence from her mother, who remains convinced she acted out of love. We've moved to a new apartment, changed our phone numbers, established boundaries that would have seemed unthinkable before. Last week, Emma came home with unexpected news. "I'm pregnant," she said, her expression a mixture of joy and apprehension. 8 weeks. In the complex emotions that followed, happiness, worry, excitement, one thought stood crystal clear. Patricia would never have the chance to manipulate our child the way she'd manipulated Emma. The generational cycle of control, disguised as love, would end with us. "Your mother will try to use this to reconnect," I warned her. Emma's face hardened with the determination I'd grown to respect these past months. "She'll try. But we decide who gets to be part of our child's life, not her." Sometimes I think about the coincidence that saved our marriage. A dashcam recording I almost deleted, a conversation that happened to take place in my car rather than elsewhere. What if I hadn't installed that camera after my fender bender? What if Emma had met Patricia at a restaurant instead? Would our marriage have survived the elaborate lie Patricia had constructed? I don't know, but I do know this. We're stronger now for having faced it. Not despite the pain, but because of what the pain revealed. About Patricia's manipulation, about Emma's insecurities, about my own blindness to the undercurrents in our marriage. As for Patricia, I sometimes feel a distant pity for her. She gambled everything, her relationship with her daughter, her credibility, her family's peace, on the conviction that she knew best, that her vision for Emma's life trumped Emma's own choices. She lost that gamble and now faces consequences I suspect she never imagined. Exclusion from our lives and soon from her grandchild's life. The most difficult lesson for Emma has been accepting that loving someone doesn't mean controlling them, that her mother's version of love came with conditions she can no longer accept. The most difficult lesson for me has been learning that sometimes the most dangerous threats come disguised as protection, that people can justify almost anything if they believe they're acting out of love. We're expecting a daughter in 5 months. We've already agreed that we'll raise her to define success on her own terms, to recognize manipulation even when it wears the mask of concern, and most importantly, to understand that love, real love, lets you choose your own path, even when it's not the one others would choose for you. That, I believe, is the most valuable lesson from all of this. And for that, in a strange way, we have Patricia to thank. The weeks following our engagement were a blur of celebration and planning. Emma wanted a small ceremony, something intimate with just close friends and family. I was on board with whatever made her happy. Her parents, however, had other ideas. Darling, you're our only daughter, Patricia reminded Emma during what was supposed to be a casual dinner at their Mercer Island home. The Wilsons have been part of Seattle society for generations. People expect a certain standard. I watched Emma's face fall slightly before she composed herself. Mom, Daniel and I want something that feels like us, not a society event. Of course, sweetheart, Patricia said, patting Emma's hand. But think about your father's business associates, our friends at the club. These relationships matter for your future. I'd been silent during these exchanges, believing it was Emma's battle to fight. Looking back, that was my first mistake. By staying quiet, I allowed Patricia to position herself as the authority on what our wedding should be, with Emma as the rebellious daughter and me as the passive outsider. The wedding gradually morphed from our vision into Patricia's. The guest list expanded from 50 to 250. The venue changed from a charming waterfront restaurant to the grand ballroom at the country club. The simple, elegant affair we'd imagined transformed into an elaborate society event. It's just one day, Emma said when I expressed concern. It makes them happy, and then we can live our lives how we want. That became our unspoken agreement. We'd compromise on the wedding to keep peace, then establish our own boundaries afterward. Another mistake. By conceding on something so personal, we set a precedent that Patricia's wishes could override our own if she pushed hard enough. On our wedding day, I barely had time alone with Emma. Patricia orchestrated everything from the minute-by-minute schedule to which photographers could access which spaces. At the reception, I found myself seated at the head table next to a cousin of Emma's I'd never met, while Emma was positioned between her parents. Still, there were perfect moments. Our first dance, where Emma whispered, "Just you and me now," as we swayed together. The quiet 5 minutes we stole away on a balcony overlooking the sound, Emma's dress gathered in her arms as we breathed. In the night air, "We did it," she said, leaning against me. "We're married." Those moments sustained me through the evening of handshakes and introductions, of hearing Patricia tell her friends, "Daniel works in computers," as if my career was a temporary situation rather than a profession I'd dedicated my life to. After the wedding, we settled into a rhythm of married life. We bought a modest but beautiful home in Queen Anne, close enough to both our workplaces that our commutes were reasonable. I continued advancing at my startup, taking on more responsibility as the company grew. Emma thrived in her role at an environmental consulting firm, her expertise increasingly sought after for complex projects. We established a tradition of Sunday brunches with her parents, not every week, but often enough to maintain the relationship. Those brunches became a theater of subtle power plays. Patricia would question our life choices while serving Belgian waffles. Richard would make comments about the stock market that somehow always circled back to my career prospects. "Daniel, have you considered moving to a more established company?" he asked one Sunday, newspaper folded beside his coffee cup. "Startups are exciting, but most fail, you know." "Our company's doing well," I replied. "We're profitable, growing, steadily." He nodded, unconvinced. "Well, when you're ready for something more substantial, I know people at Amazon, Microsoft." "Dad," Emma interjected, "Daniel's company just secured major contracts with 3 Fortune 500 clients. They're hardly struggling." Richard raised his eyebrows. "That's nice, sweetheart. I'm just saying that stability matters, especially when you start thinking about children." This was another consistent theme, the hypothetical grandchildren, that Patricia and Richard seemed to think would necessitate a complete realignment of our priorities, specifically my career. We managed to maintain a polite equilibrium for the first few years of our marriage. Emma and I built our life together, traveling when we could, establishing traditions of our own, making friends as a couple. We learned each other's rhythms, The silent language of facial expressions and gestures that only develops with time and intimacy. Things began to shift subtly after our third anniversary. The startup I worked for was acquired by a larger tech company, a success story by any standard. I received a significant payout and was offered a leadership position in the new organization. Instead of congratulating us, Patricia focused on a different aspect. "So you'll be an employee now, not an owner," she observed during brunch the Sunday after the announcement. "That's probably more secure, even if it's less exciting." "Actually, I'll have an excellent position with greater resources," I corrected her. "And the acquisition is validation of what we built." "Of course," she smiled thinly. "And with that money, you might consider moving to a more suitable neighborhood. Queen Anne is lovely, but Broadmoor or Madison Park would be more appropriate for your new status." Emma squeezed my hand under the table, our signal that I should let it go. Later, at home, she apologized. "She means well. She just expresses it badly." "Does she mean well?" I asked, the question that had been building, for years finally surfacing. "Or does she simply want us to live the life she envisions, regardless of what we want?" Emma sighed, slipping off her shoes and curling into our couch. "It's complicated. My parents' approval has always been conditional. They love me, but they've always had very specific ideas about what my life should look like, and I don't fit those ideas." "You don't," she admitted, "but that's their problem, not ours." I wish I could say that was the end of it, that we established firm boundaries and Patricia respected them, but real life is messier than that. The tension continued, occasionally erupting into more overt conflict before subsiding back into polite disapproval. The real turning point came when Emma and I decided to start trying for a baby. We'd been married 4 years, were financially secure, and felt ready for this next step. We didn't announce our decision immediately, wanting to avoid the pressure of monthly inquiries about our progress. For 6 months, we kept it between us. When Emma didn't get pregnant right away, we began basic fertility testing. Everything looked normal, but the doctor suggested we might need some minor interventions if another 6 months passed without success. One evening, Emma received a call from her mother. I could only hear Emma's side of the conversation, but her responses grew increasingly defensive. "No, Mom, we're not putting it off intentionally. Yes, I'm aware of how fertility declines. That's a personal question. No, Daniel doesn't have an issue with children. I need to go now." She hung up, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. She wanted to know why we haven't started a family yet. Apparently, her friend Barbara's daughter just announced her pregnancy, and it made her think about how we're falling behind. I sat beside her on the couch. "Did you tell her we've been trying?" "No," Emma shook her head. "I don't want her involvement in this, not with her opinions and judgments. This is ours." I agreed, but the conversation had clearly upset Emma. For the next week, she was quieter than usual, more withdrawn. "What's really bothering you?" I finally asked one night as we were getting ready for bed. Emma paused, toothbrush in hand. "What if she's right? What if we've waited too long? What if there is something wrong with us?" "Hey," I said, taking the toothbrush and setting it aside so I could hold both her hands. "We're following medical advice. 6 months isn't that long to be trying, and if we do need some help, that's okay too." She nodded, but didn't look convinced. "My mother had me at 26. I'm 32. And that's still well within the normal range for having children," I reminded her. "Don't let her anxiety become yours." But it was too late. The seed of doubt had been planted. What had been an exciting, if occasionally disappointing journey became fraught with anxiety. Each month that passed without a positive test felt like confirmation of Patricia's warnings. 2 months after that phone call, Patricia invited us to dinner at their home, just the four of us. "I've been thinking about you both," she said as she served a roast that probably cost more than our weekly grocery budget. "And I want to help." Emma looked up warily. "Help with what?" "With your situation," Patricia said delicately. "I've spoken with Dr. Harmon. You remember him. He delivered you. He's semi-retired now, but still consults. He's willing to see you as a favor to me." The silence that followed was deafening. Emma set down her fork. "Our situation. Darling, it's nothing to be embarrassed about. Many couples struggle with fertility, especially when they start trying later." "Who said we're trying?" Emma's voice was dangerously calm. Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "You don't need to pretend. I'm your mother. I know you want children. And you've been married over 4 years now. If there hasn't been an announcement yet, clearly there's an issue." I watched Emma's face transition from shock to fury. "There is no issue, Mom, and if there were, it would be private. Between me and Daniel." "Of course, but family helps family," Patricia insisted. "Dr. Harmon is very discreet, and he knows all the best reproductive specialists if you need referrals." Emma stood up abruptly. "We're leaving. Thank you for dinner." Patricia looked genuinely surprised. "Emma, don't be so sensitive. I'm only trying to help." "You're overstepping. Again." Emma grabbed her purse. "Daniel, are you coming?" I stood immediately, nodding politely to Richard, who had remained characteristically silent throughout the exchange. "Thank you for having us." As we drove home, Emma stared out the passenger window, tears streaming silently down her face. "I can't believe she did that," she finally said. "How did she even know we're trying?" "She didn't," I replied. "She was guessing, and you confirmed it by reacting." Emma groaned, leaning her head back against the seat. "You're right. God, I walked right into that. It's not your fault. She blindsided you. But why? Why can't she just let us live our lives without her constant interference?" It was a question I'd been asking myself for years. I began carefully. "Your mother only feels secure when she's in control. Our marriage, our choices, they represent parts of your life she can't dictate, and that threatens her." Emma was quiet for a long moment. "When I was growing up, everything was decided for me. Where I went to school, what activities I participated in, who my friends were. My whole life was curated by my parents, especially my mother." "When did that change?" "When I met you," she said simply. "You were the first major decision I made that wasn't guided by them. Maybe that's why they've never fully accepted you. You represent my independence." That night marked a shift in our approach to Emma's parents. We agreed to establish clearer boundaries, to limit our Sunday brunches to once a month, to change the subject firmly when Patricia or Richard overstepped. It worked, to a degree. The tension remained, but the overt interference decreased. Patricia seemed to recognize that she'd pushed too far with the fertility specialist's suggestion. 2 months later, Emma discovered she was pregnant. We were cautiously ecstatic, aware that early pregnancy was fragile, but unable to contain our joy completely. "When should we tell my parents?" Emma asked as we lay in bed that night, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "Conventional wisdom says to wait until the second trimester when the risk of miscarriage decreases," I replied. Emma nodded. "That's what I was thinking. 12 weeks. We managed to keep the secret for exactly 2 weeks. Then Patricia called with an invitation to a black tie gala benefiting the Children's Hospital, a major social event on the Seattle charity circuit. "It's this Saturday," she said. "I've already reserved your tickets at our table." "Mom, we can't make it this weekend," Emma replied. "We have other plans." "What plans could possibly be more important? The governor will be there, and you know how much your father values those connections." "We just can't," Emma insisted. "I'm sorry." There was a pause. "Emma, are you sick? You sound tired." I'm fine, just busy with work. Another pause. Are you pregnant? Is that why you can't attend? Emma's eyes widened as she looked at me across our kitchen. I shook my head vigorously. No, Mom, she lied. We're just busy. Because if you are, you should tell me. I'm your mother. I should be the first to know. There's nothing to know, Emma said firmly. We'll see you for brunch next Sunday, okay? After she hung up, Emma groaned. She knows. Somehow she always knows. She's guessing, I assured her. She throws these things out, hoping you'll confirm them. But Emma was right. Patricia had an uncanny ability to sense changes in her daughter's life, a maternal radar that penetrated our attempts at privacy. At Sunday brunch, Patricia watched Emma like a hawk, noting that she chose water instead of her usual mimosa, that she only picked at the smoked salmon. You're looking a little pale, darling, Patricia observed as she refreshed Richard's coffee. Are you getting enough iron? Emma forced a smile. I'm fine, Mom. Just a busy week at work. Patricia, set down the coffee pot. You know, when I was pregnant with you, I couldn't stand the smell of coffee. Made me absolutely nauseous. Emma's fork clattered against her plate. Mom, please. What? I'm just reminiscing. Patricia's innocent expression fooled no one. Though now that you mention it, you do have that glow about you, I interjected, hoping to redirect the conversation. Richard, how was your golf game yesterday? You mentioned you were playing with the mayor. Richard looked up from his newspaper. Oh yes, good game. Jim's got a solid drive, though his short game needs work. Mom, Emma said quietly but firmly, we were planning to wait until 12 weeks. Please respect that. Patricia's face lit up. I knew it. Oh, darling, how wonderful. She rushed around the table to embrace Emma, who remained stiff in her arms. How far along are you? When are you due? Have you seen Dr. Harmon yet? 8 weeks, Emma said, resignation in her voice. Due in October, and no, we have our own. Doctor, thank you. 8 weeks is so early, Patricia frowned. You really should see a specialist right away. I'll call Arthur tomorrow. No, I interrupted more forcefully than I'd intended. Everyone at the table looked at me in surprise. I rarely contradicted Patricia directly. Thank you, but we're very happy with our current medical team. Patricia's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Daniel, I appreciate that you're trying to be involved, but when it comes to pregnancy and childbirth, experience matters. I've been through it, and I know the best doctors in Seattle. And we've researched our options, I replied evenly. We've chosen a practice we're comfortable with. Well, Patricia sniffed, turning back to Emma, when you're further along, we'll discuss the baby shower. I'm thinking late August at the club. The garden room would be perfect. And just like that, our pregnancy was co-opted into Patricia's social calendar. What should have been a joyful private milestone became another battlefield in the ongoing war for control of Emma's life, and now our child's. The following months brought more of the same. Patricia had opinions on everything, which prenatal vitamins Emma should take, which childbirth classes we should attend, which stroller we should register for. She forwarded articles about the dangers of various foods, the importance of classical music for fetal development, the advantages of private cord blood banking. Emma tried to establish boundaries, but pregnancy made her more vulnerable, more open to her mother's suggestions. The physical changes and hormonal fluctuations left her seeking reassurance, and Patricia was all too happy to position herself as the expert whose advice should be heeded. My mother means well, Emma would say after particularly invasive phone calls. She just wants the best for the baby. I bit my tongue more often than not wanting to add to Emma's stress. But I worried about the pattern we were establishing, the precedent of Patricia's over-involvement that might extend beyond pregnancy into our child's life. At 20 weeks, We learned we were having a girl. We shared the news with close friends, but decided not to tell Emma's parents immediately, wanting to savor the information ourselves first. 3 days later, Patricia called. "Emma, darling, a girl, how wonderful!" Emma froze, phone to her ear. "How did you know that?" "Oh," Patricia sounded momentarily flustered. "I just assumed. Mother's intuition, I suppose." "Mom, we haven't told anyone in the family yet. Who told you?" A pause. "Well, if you must know, I ran into Dr. Mitchell at the club yesterday. Her daughter works at your doctor's office. She mentioned you'd had your 20-week scan. That's a violation of my medical privacy," Emma said, her voice shaking with anger. "Don't be dramatic, sweetheart. It's wonderful news. I've already started looking at the most darling little dresses. And we should discuss names. Family names are so important. My grandmother Charlotte—" "Stop," Emma interrupted. "Just stop. You had no right to that information before we chose to share it." She hung up, then immediately burst into tears. I held her as she sobbed, her body shaking with a mixture of anger, violation, and the overwhelming hormones of pregnancy. "I need to switch doctors," she said when she'd calmed down. "I can't trust that office anymore." We found a new practice the next day, one with no social connections to the Wilson family. We provided explicit instructions that no information was to be shared with anyone, including parents, without our direct consent. For 2 blissful weeks, we had peace. Then the packages started arriving, baby clothes, blankets, toys, all delivered. To our home with notes from Patricia. "Couldn't resist this for my granddaughter. Every baby girl needs a silver rattle. This was your favorite book as a child." The gifts themselves weren't the problem. It was the message behind them. "I'm still involved. I can't be excluded. This child is partly mine." At 28 weeks, things escalated again. Patricia called on a Tuesday evening, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Emma, darling, I wanted to discuss something with you and Daniel. Your father and I have been thinking about the future, about our granddaughter." Emma put the call on speaker so I could hear. "What about her?" "Well, we'd like to establish a trust fund for her education, a substantial one, private school, university, even graduate school if she chooses." Emma looked at me, eyebrows raised. I shrugged. Financial assistance for our child's education seemed like an unmitigated good. "That's very generous, Mom," Emma said cautiously. "We'd need to see the details, of course." "Of course," Patricia agreed too quickly. "We can have our attorney draft the paperwork. There would just be a few conditions." And there it was. "What kind of conditions?" I asked. "Oh, Daniel, I didn't realize you were there," Patricia said, her tone cooling slightly. "Nothing unusual, standard terms. The child would need to attend approved educational institutions. There would be certain expectations regarding extracurricular activities, summer programs, and we'd want some meaningful involvement in these decisions." "Meaningful involvement," I repeated. "What exactly does that mean?" "Regular visitation, consultation on major decisions affecting her upbringing. The usual grandparent role, but formalized." Emma and I exchanged alarmed glances. "Mom, that sounds less like a gift and more like a custody arrangement." "Don't be ridiculous, Emma. We're talking about financial security for your child, something any parent would want." "Not with strings attached," Emma replied firmly. "Thank you for the offer, but we'll provide for our daughter ourselves." There was a long silence. "I see. Well, think about it. The offer remains open." After she hung up, Emma shook her head in disbelief. "She's trying to buy access to our child." "Access and control," I agreed, "just like she's always done with you." The incident crystallized something we'd both been feeling, that having a child wasn't just about becoming parents. It was about forming our own family unit, one that needed protection from Patricia's manipulative influence. We began taking concrete steps. We met with an attorney to update our wills and establish guardianship provisions that specifically excluded Patricia and Richard as potential guardians of our child. We created a detailed birth plan that limited hospital visitors and explicitly stated that no one, including grandparents, was to hold the baby before both parents had done so. As Emma's due date approached, Patricia's attempts to insert herself intensified. She suggested moving into our guest room for the first few weeks to help. She forwarded listings for nanny services, all recommended by her friends. She compiled a spreadsheet of acceptable pediatricians, heavily weighted toward those who had treated children of Seattle's elite families. With each suggestion, each attempt at control, our resolve strengthened. This child, our daughter, would not grow up under Patricia's influence the way Emma had. She would know her grandparents, but on our terms, within the boundaries we established. Emma went into labor 2 weeks early, on a rainy Tuesday morning in late September. We drove calmly to the hospital, followed our carefully crafted birth plan, and welcomed our daughter, Lily Grace Cooper, at 7:38 that evening. I texted both sets of parents with the news, including a photo of Emma holding our swaddled newborn. My parents responded with joy and a promise to visit when we were ready. Patricia called within minutes, demanding to know which hospital we were at and announcing she was on her way. "We're not accepting visitors tonight," I told her firmly. "Emma needs rest, and we need time to bond with Lily." "Don't be absurd, Daniel. I'm her grandmother, not some casual acquaintance. And we're her parents. We'll let you know when we're ready for visitors." I could practically hear her seething through the phone. "Put Emma on. She's resting. I don't believe you, Emma, would want me there." I looked across the hospital room at my exhausted wife, now sleeping peacefully with our daughter in a bassinet beside her. "Believe what you want, Patricia. No visitors tonight." The next morning, despite our explicit instructions, Patricia appeared at the maternity ward, arms laden with flowers, balloons, and gift bags. She was stopped at the nurses' station, where our instructions about approved visitors were on file. She called my cell phone from the waiting area, her voice tight with controlled fury. "Daniel, this is ridiculous. The nurse won't let me see my own daughter and granddaughter." "As I told you last night, we're not ready for visitors," I repeated. "I've driven all the way from Mercer Island. I've brought gifts. I am not leaving without seeing my granddaughter." I sighed, feeling a headache building behind my eyes. "Patricia, this isn't negotiable. We'll arrange a visit tomorrow after Emma's had more rest." "Put Emma on the phone right now," she demanded. "No, she's feeding the baby. I've seen my daughter breastfeed before, Daniel. I'm coming in." "If you try to enter this room against our wishes," I said quietly, "I will have security escort you out, and we will reconsider when or if you'll be permitted to meet Lily at all." There was a shocked silence. Then, "You can't keep my granddaughter from me." "Watch me," I replied and hung up. When I told Emma about the exchange later, she was upset but resolute. She needs to understand that we make the decisions now, not her. The next day, we allowed a brief visit. Patricia was icily polite to me, but melted the moment she held Lily, cooing and making predictions about whom she resembled. "She has the Wilson nose, definitely, and my mother's chin." I bit back the observation that our newborn's features were still too undefined to claim any familial resemblance, especially to people she shared no DNA with. The pattern continued through our daughter's first months. Patricia would push boundaries. We would reinforce them. She would retreat temporarily before trying again from a different angle. It was exhausting but necessary. When Lily was 4 months old, Patricia arrived for a visit with a small velvet box. Inside was a pair of diamond earrings. "For when you pierce her ears," she explained. "These were my grandmother's, then mine. Then Emma's family tradition. We haven't decided if or when we'll pierce her ears, I said carefully. That's a decision she can make when she's older. Patricia looked genuinely confused. But all the women in our family have their ears pierced as babies. It's tradition, not our tradition, Emma replied gently. Thank you for the earrings. We'll keep them safe until Lily is old enough to decide if she wants them. It was a small exchange, but it represented the larger struggle, the clash between Patricia's assumption of cultural and familial continuity and our determination to make our own choices as parents. At 6 months, Lily was thriving. Curious, happy, developing right on schedule. Emma had returned to work part-time, and we'd found a wonderful nanny named Maya who came to our home 3 days a week. Patricia disapproved, of course. I don't understand why you won't use the childcare service I recommended. The Brightons and the Montgomerys both send their children there. It's where all the right families go. Maya is excellent with Lily, Emma explained for what felt like the 100th time, and we prefer having her at home for now. But think of the social connection she's missing, the children she could be meeting. She's 6 months old, Mom. Her social needs are being met. It became increasingly clear that Patricia viewed Lily not just as a beloved grandchild, but as a second chance, an opportunity to shape another generation of the Wilson family according to her specifications, to correct what she perceived as Emma's deviations from the proper path. The breaking point came when Lily was 8 months old. We'd planned a small birthday celebration for Emma, just the 3 of us plus my parents, who were visiting from Michigan. Patricia and Richard had sent a gift but weren't invited to the intimate dinner. Halfway through the evening, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Patricia and Richard on our doorstep, dressed for a formal dinner and bearing gifts and a cake. "Surprise!" Patricia exclaimed, brushing past me into the house. We couldn't let our daughter's birthday pass without celebrating properly. She stopped short when she saw my parents at the table, clearly shocked to find other people at the gathering she hadn't been invited to. "Oh," she said, her smile faltering. "I didn't realize you had company." The awkwardness was palpable as Emma introduced her parents to mine. Patricia's smile remained fixed, but her eyes were cold as she assessed my parents, my father in his comfortable khakis, my mother in a simple sweater and slacks, both so clearly not from the world Patricia valued. Throughout the impromptu joint celebration, Patricia made subtle remarks highlighting the differences between our families. She referenced shared acquaintances my parents couldn't possibly know, reminisced about vacations to places they'd never visited, mentioned Emma's childhood, experiences at institutions far beyond what my teacher parents could have afforded. It was a masterclass in subtle social aggression, designed to establish hierarchy, to remind everyone present of the gap between the Wilsons and the Coopers. My parents, to their credit, remained gracious and warm, either not noticing or choosing to ignore Patricia's behavior. Later that night, after everyone had left and Emma was putting Lily to bed, I found myself staring at our wedding photo on the mantel. Emma and I looked so happy, so certain of our future together. We hadn't anticipated the ongoing battle her mother would wage for influence over our lives, the constant reinforcement of boundaries that should have been automatic. I realized then that we'd been playing defense for years, reacting to Patricia's maneuvers rather than proactively defining our family on our terms. That needed to change. We needed to shift from merely resisting Patricia's influence to actively building the family culture we wanted for Lily. When Emma joined me on the couch, I shared these thoughts. I'm tired of every family decision being a response to your mother, I told her. I want us to define what our family stands for, what traditions we want to create for Lily. Emma nodded slowly. You're right. We've spent so much energy establishing what we don't want that we haven't focused enough on what we do want. That conversation marked a turning point. We began consciously creating our own family culture, establishing traditions, values, and expectations that reflected our shared vision, not in opposition to Patricia, but independent of her influence. We created weekly rituals, Sunday morning pancakes, evening walks around the neighborhood, bath time stories. We discussed the values we wanted to instill in Lily: curiosity, kindness, resilience. We made plans for future traditions: summer, camping trips, holiday celebrations that combined elements from both our childhoods. When Patricia attempted to intervene or impose her vision, we no longer engaged in point-by-point refutals. Instead, we simply stated, "This is what works for our family," and moved forward with our plans regardless of her approval. It wasn't a perfect solution. Patricia continued her attempts at control, sometimes subtly, sometimes overtly, but our focus had shifted. Instead of Patricia being the primary consideration in our decisions, she became peripheral, a factor to manage rather than a force to resist. As Lily approached her first birthday, we planned a simple celebration in our backyard. A few friends with children of similar ages, cupcakes, bubbles, and a small wading pool. Nothing elaborate, no photographers or caterers or monogrammed party favors. Patricia was, predictably, aghast. "But darling, the first birthday is so important. We should do it properly. At the club, or at least hire that event planner I told you about." "This is what we want," Emma replied simply. "You're welcome to join us, but this is the party we're having." For once, Patricia seemed to recognize that pushing wouldn't work. She attended the backyard party, visibly restraining herself from suggesting improvements or expressing dismay at the casual nature of the celebration. As I watched my daughter toddle around the yard in her sun hat, squealing with delight at bubbles and the attention of loved ones, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was the childhood we wanted for her: joyful, authentic, unburdened by social expectations or performances for others' approval. Looking across the yard, I caught Emma's eye. She smiled, and I could see she felt it too. The quiet triumph of creating our family on our own terms, the freedom that came from breaking the cycles of control that had shaped her childhood. Patricia would always be part of our lives, always trying to assert her vision. But something fundamental had shifted. We were no longer reacting to her. We were creating our own path, our own traditions, our own definition of family. It wasn't the dramatic confrontation I'd sometimes fantasized about, where Patricia finally recognized the harm her controlling behavior caused. It was something more subtle, but ultimately more powerful: the steady, consistent assertion of our autonomy. As a family unit, neither defined by nor in opposition to her influence. As we put Lily to bed that night after her party, exhausted but happy, Emma leaned against me in the nursery doorway. "We're doing okay, aren't we?" she whispered. I looked at our sleeping daughter, at the home we'd created together, at the woman who had chosen to build a life with me despite her mother's disapproval. "Better than okay," I replied. "We're doing it our way." That, I realized, was the real victory. Not defeating Patricia in some grand showdown, but simply living authentically, making choices based on our values rather than in reaction to her expectations. It wasn't perfect, and the struggle wasn't over, but we were creating something beautiful together, something that was uniquely ours. The following Monday, I returned to work with a renewed sense of purpose. Our family was strong, our boundaries clearer than ever. Whatever challenges Patricia might present in the future, we would face them together, grounded in the family culture we were deliberately building. I couldn't have known then how soon those boundaries would be tested, or how dramatically Patricia would escalate her attempts to control our family. The calm we'd established was temporary, a brief respite before the storm that would threaten not just our relationship with Emma's parents, but the foundation of our marriage itself. The storm broke on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday morning. Lily had just turned 14 months old and was taking her first confident steps around our living room, her face a mixture of determination and delight. Emma was filming on her phone, while I hovered nearby, ready to catch our daughter if she toppled. It was one of those perfect family moments, simple, joyful, complete. Then Emma's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "It's my father. He never calls during work hours." She answered, and I watched her expression shift from confusion to concern to something that looked like fear. "Dad, slow down. What's happened?" A pause. "She's where? Since when?" Another pause. "Yes, we'll be right there." Emma hung up, her face pale. "My mother's in the hospital. Dad found her unconscious this morning. They think it might have been a stroke." We rushed to gather Lily's things, my mind already calculating logistics, what meetings I'd need to reschedule, who could cover my projects, how long we might need to stay at the hospital. Throughout it all, a cold thread of guilt wound through me. Despite our conflicts with Patricia, I'd never wished her harm. At the hospital, we found Richard pacing the waiting area outside the ICU, looking suddenly aged and small, without Patricia beside him. When he saw Emma, he embraced her with uncharacteristic emotion. "They're running tests," he said, his voice rough. "She was fine last night, perfectly fine. Then this morning she didn't come down for breakfast. I found her on the bathroom floor." Emma squeezed his hand. "What have the doctors said?" "Not a stroke, they think. Maybe an aneurysm or some kind of seizure. They're not sure yet." He glanced at Lily, who was watching the activity around her with wide eyes from her perch in my arms. "She shouldn't be here. The ICU doesn't allow children anyway." "I can take her home," I offered, "or call our nanny to come get her." Emma looked torn. "I should be here, but—" "I'll stay," I said firmly. "You be with your dad. I'll take Lily home and come back once Maya can take over." Relief flooded her face. "Thank you," she whispered, kissing my cheek before turning. Back to her father. I drove home with Lily babbling in her car seat, my mind churning. Whatever our issues with Patricia, she was Emma's mother, Lily's grandmother. The thought that she might be seriously ill or worse cast everything in a different light. The boundaries we'd established, the conflicts over control, none of it seemed as important in the face of mortality. Maya arrived within the hour, concern evident on her face. "Take as long as you need," she assured me. "Lily and I will be fine." I returned to the hospital to find Emma and Richard speaking with a neurologist in a small consultation room. I slipped in quietly, catching the tail end of his explanation. "What we call a transient ischemic attack, essentially a mini-stroke. The symptoms can mimic a major stroke, but typically resolve within 24 hours. Mrs. Wilson is already showing significant improvement." "So she'll recover completely?" Emma asked. The doctor's expression was measured. "In many cases, yes. But a TIA is often a warning sign. About 1/3 of people who experience a TIA will eventually have a full stroke, many within a year if preventative measures aren't taken." Richard nodded stiffly. "What measures?" "Medication, certainly. Lifestyle changes, diet, exercise, stress management. Mrs. Wilson's blood pressure was dangerously high when she was admitted. Has she been under unusual stress recently?" Richard and Emma exchanged a glance that spoke volumes. Patricia's entire existence was built around maintaining appearances, social obligations, and controlling her family's image. Stress was her constant companion, though she would never admit it. "She keeps herself, busy," Richard said carefully. The doctor nodded as if he'd heard this before. "Well, that will need to change." rest, reduced responsibilities, a calmer daily routine. These aren't suggestions, they're necessities. After he left, Richard looked lost. She won't like that, not one bit. She doesn't have a choice, Dad, Emma said gently. Her health depends on it. He rubbed his face. You don't understand. Your mother, her social obligations, her committees, her projects, they're not just activities to her. They're her purpose, her identity. Dean, I stayed silent, thinking about how much of Patricia's purpose had involved trying to shape Emma's life, and more recently, Lily's. If those efforts now posed a literal threat to her health, perhaps she would finally have to relinquish some control. We were allowed to see Patricia briefly that afternoon. She looked smaller in the hospital bed, her makeup-free face revealing her age in a way her carefully maintained appearance usually concealed. But her eyes were alert, and when she saw Emma, she reached out her hand. "Darling," she said, her voice weaker but still recognizably Patricia's. "You didn't need to rush here. It was just a little episode." Emma squeezed her hand. "It was not a little episode, Mom. The doctor says you had a mini stroke." Patricia waved her free hand dismissively. "Doctors are always so dramatic. I'll be fine in a day or two, just in time for the Hospital Foundation Gala. You haven't forgotten you're on the committee, have you?" Emma glanced at me, then back at her mother. "Mom, you heard what the doctor said. You need rest, reduced stress. The gala will have to go on without you this year." "Nonsense!" Patricia tried to sit up straighter but winced. "I've chaired that committee for 12 years. I'm not about to step down now." Richard cleared his throat. "Patricia, please, your health has to come first." She looked at him with genuine surprise, as if the concept of prioritizing health over social obligations was entirely foreign. "Richard, you know how important these connections are, for all of us." The "all of us" hung in the air, a reminder of how Patricia viewed the family as a unified entity under her direction, all members expected to maintain the Wilson social position regardless of their own desires. "The connections will still be there next year," Emma said firmly. "Right now you need to focus on getting well." Patricia's lips thinned, but she seemed too tired to argue further. We left soon after, with promises to return the next day. In the hospital parking lot, Richard hesitated beside his car. "She's going to need help when she comes home. The house is too big for her to manage alone right now, and I'm not. I don't know how to handle all the things she does." The unspoken request hung between us. Emma looked at me, questioning. I nodded slightly. "We'll help, Dad," she said. "Whatever you need." And that's how we found ourselves temporarily moving into the Wilson family home 2 days later. Patricia was being discharged with strict orders for rest, medication, and stress reduction, orders she had already made clear she intended to interpret loosely. "It's just for a week or two," Emma assured me as we packed bags for ourselves and Lily, "just until Mum's stable and they've figured out a more permanent arrangement." I nodded, trying to ignore the knot of apprehension forming in my stomach. Living under Patricia's roof, even temporarily, meant operating on her territory, by her rules. All the boundaries we'd established over years would be tested, if not erased entirely. The first few days went relatively smoothly. Patricia was genuinely weakened by her health scare, spending much of her time resting in the sunroom that overlooked Puget Sound. Emma took over, managing her mother's medications and appointments, while I helped Richard with practical matters around the house and property. Lily toddled around the sprawling home, delighted by the new spaces to explore and the constant attention from her grandparents. By the end of the first week, however, Patricia was beginning to reassert herself. It started small. Instructions about how the gardener should trim the hedges, comments about the proper way to set the dining table, observations about Lily's clothing or schedule. "Darling, Are you sure she should be napping at that time? It's going to disrupt her night's sleep, she told Emma one afternoon. When you were little, I always put you down at 1 o'clock precisely. You slept like a dream. Emma maintained a patient smile. Every child is different, Mum. This schedule works well for Lily. Patricia pursed her lips but didn't argue. A restraint that was more about her reduced energy than actual acceptance. The real turning point came in the second week. I was working remotely from Richard's study when I overheard Patricia and Emma in the hallway outside. I've been thinking, Patricia was saying, about your living situation. Our house, you mean, Emma replied, an edge of wariness in her voice. Yes, it's a lovely starter home, but now that you have Lily, wouldn't it make more sense to consider something larger, something in a better school district? Our district is fine, Mom. One of the best in Seattle, actually. Public schools, yes, but you know what I mean. I could practically see Emma's expression, that careful neutrality she adopted when navigating her mother's suggestions. We're happy where we are. Well, Patricia continued, her tone deceptively casual, your father and I have been talking. This house is really too large for just the two of us, especially now that my activities will be curtailed. We thought perhaps you might consider moving in permanently. There was a pause so long I almost stepped into the hallway to check on them. Move in here? All three of us? Emma finally asked. It makes perfect sense, Patricia said, warming to her topic. There's more than enough space. Lily would have the yard, the pool when she's older. Better schools, better neighborhood. And frankly, darling, your father and I could use the help. My condition has made us realize we're not getting any younger. It was a masterful maneuver, I had to admit. Patricia had taken her health crisis and transformed it into an opportunity to reassert control over Emma's life, all under the guise of practical family considerations. Mom, that's a big decision. Daniel and I would need to discuss it. Of course, Patricia agreed smoothly. Take all the time you need, but do consider the advantages for everyone. That evening, after Lily was asleep in the guest room, that had been hastily converted to a nursery, Emma and I sat on the balcony outside our temporary bedroom. You heard, she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. Most of it. What do you think? I chose my words carefully. I think your mother sees an opportunity to bring you back into her orbit, to influence Lily's upbringing in a way she couldn't if we maintained separate households. Emma sighed, looking out over the darkened water. She's also genuinely scared. The TIA frightened her, though she'd never admit it. And Dad, he's lost without her at full capacity. That may be true, I acknowledged, but it doesn't mean moving in here is the right solution for anyone. I know. She leaned against me. I just feel torn. They do need help, and they are my parents. There are other ways to help them that don't involve surrendering our independence. Hired help, for instance. Your parents can certainly afford it. Emma nodded slowly. Mom would hate having strangers in the house, but you're right, there are alternatives. The conversation was interrupted by a soft cry from Lily's room. Emma went to check on her, and I remained on the balcony, contemplating the subtle shift that had occurred. We were now discussing how to help Patricia and Richard while maintaining our boundaries, not whether we would move into their home. The idea itself had been normalized by Patricia's suggestion, transformed from unthinkable to negotiable in a single conversation. This, I realized, was how Patricia had always operated, not through direct confrontation, but through the careful repositioning of boundaries, the gradual normalization of her preferences until resistance seemed unreasonable. The next morning at breakfast, Patricia looked better than she had since her hospitalization, more alert, more like her usual self. She beamed at Lily, who was messily eating cut strawberries in her high chair. I've been thinking about the "East Wing," she announced. "The rooms there get wonderful morning light, perfect for a child. The suite at the end could be converted into a lovely master bedroom for you two, and the small room adjacent would make an ideal nursery for when you have another baby." Emma nearly choked on her coffee. "Mum, we haven't agreed to move in. We need time to consider all options." Patricia patted her hand. "Of course, darling, I'm merely thinking ahead. Planning makes transitions so much smoother." Richard, who had been quiet during this exchange, suddenly spoke up. "Patricia, you're pushing too hard. Emma and Daniel have their own home, their own life." All three of us stared at him in surprise. Richard rarely contradicted his wife, especially not in front of others. Patricia's expression froze momentarily, before softening into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm not pushing anything, Richard, just offering possibilities. Emma knows I only want what's best for her and Lily." "Does she?" Richard asked quietly. "Or do you want what you think is best? There's a difference." The tension in the room was palpable. Patricia's grip on her water glass tightened. "I don't think this is an appropriate conversation for the breakfast table." "When is it appropriate?" "Then," Richard pressed, an unfamiliar edge to his voice, "when Emma and Daniel have already been pressured into decisions they don't want to make. When Lily is enrolled in schools and activities of your choosing without their input." Patricia stood abruptly. "I'm feeling tired. I think I'll rest before my physical therapy appointment." She left without another word, her back rigid. Emma looked at her father with new eyes. "Dad," he sighed, suddenly looking every bit his age. "Your mother means well. She always has. But her well-meaning has cost us all too much over the years." He glanced at me, then back to Emma, "including my relationship with you." It was the most direct acknowledgement Richard had ever made of the dynamic that had shaped our interactions with him and Patricia. I felt a newfound respect for my father-in-law, recognizing that perhaps he too had been navigating Patricia's control in his own way all these years. "Why now?" Emma asked softly. "Why are you saying this now?" Richard looked down at his hands, strong and weathered from the sailing he loved but rarely found time for. "When I found your mother on that bathroom floor, I thought she was gone. In that moment, all the social connections, all the appearances we've maintained, none of it mattered. What mattered was the time we've wasted on things that don't bring any real joy." He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. "Daniel, I owe you an apology. You've been good for Emma, good to her. I should have said so years ago." I was speechless. After 6 years of cool politeness, of tacit alignment with Patricia's assessment of me as inadequate, this admission felt seismic. "Thank you," I managed. "Finally. That means a lot." Richard nodded once, then turned to Emma. "Whatever you and Daniel decide about helping your mother, it needs to be your decision, not hers. I'll support you either way." After he left for a doctor's appointment with Patricia, Emma and I sat in stunned silence for several minutes. "Did that really just happen?" she finally asked. "I think your father just declared independence," I replied, still processing the conversation. "In 34 years, I've never heard him contradict her like that. Not once." I thought about the revelation Richard had shared, how facing Patricia's mortality had shifted his perspective on what truly mattered. Near-death experiences have a way of clarifying things. Emma nodded slowly, for both of them apparently, just in opposite directions. Mom is doubling down on control, while Dad seems to be letting go. That evening, Patricia was uncharacteristically subdued at dinner. She watched Richard with a puzzled expression, as if trying to reconcile the man across the table with the husband who had acquiesced to her wishes for decades. After Lily was in bed, Patricia invited Emma to join her in the sunroom for a chat. I offered to come along, but Patricia shook her head. Just mother and daughter tonight, Daniel. I'm sure you understand. I did understand. Too well. Patricia was regrouping, adjusting her strategy after Richard's unexpected resistance. She would focus on Emma alone, where her influence was strongest and longest established. Emma squeezed my hand. It's fine. We'll just talk. I nodded, but unease settled in my stomach as I watched them disappear down the hallway. I retreated to our temporary bedroom, trying to distract myself with work emails, but my mind kept returning to the conversation happening elsewhere in the house. Emma returned nearly 2 hours later, her expression troubled. She sat on the edge of the bed, her shoulders slumped. "That bad?" I asked. She sighed. "She's afraid. Really afraid, Daniel, not just about her health, but about losing control of her life, her identity, everything she's built." "What did she say about us? About moving in?" She didn't press it directly, but she talked about legacy, about family traditions, about Lily growing up knowing her heritage. Emma's voice caught. "She cried, Daniel. I've seen my mother cry maybe 3 times in my entire life." I moved closer, putting an arm around her shoulders. "That doesn't mean her suggestions are right for us." "I know, but seeing her vulnerable, like that." She leaned against me. She showed me photos from when I was little, reminded me of family vacations, traditions, said she'd always imagined passing those experiences on to her grandchildren. It was classic Patricia, using emotional leverage where logical arguments failed. The health crisis had simply given her a new and powerful tool, genuine vulnerability mixed with calculated manipulation. "What do you want to do?" I asked finally. Emma was quiet for a long moment. "I want to help them. They do need support right now, but I don't want to move in permanently." She looked up at me. "What if we stay a little longer, just until Mom's more stable and they have proper help arranged? A month, maybe." A month in Patricia's domain, under her influence, seemed like an eternity, but I could see the conflict in Emma's eyes, the genuine concern for her parents warring with her desire to maintain our family's independence. "If that's what you think is best," I agreed reluctantly, "but we set a firm end date, and we keep Lily's routine as normal as possible." Emma nodded, relief evident in her expression. "Agreed. Absolutely." The next morning we presented our decision to Patricia and Richard over breakfast. We would extend our stay for 1 month, during which time we would help them arrange for appropriate ongoing support, a part-time nurse for Patricia, household help for the daily tasks she could no longer manage safely. Patricia accepted with a graciousness that didn't quite mask her disappointment that our commitment wasn't open-ended. Richard, however, nodded in clear approval. "That's very generous," he said. "We appreciate the help, but you need to maintain your own household, your own family life." Patricia's expression tightened momentarily before smoothing into a smile. "Of course, though you know you're always welcome here for as long as you like." The extended arrangement began well enough. Patricia seemed to accept our decision, focusing her energy on regaining strength through her prescribed physical therapy. Richard became more engaged with Lily, taking her for walks in the garden, reading to her from his collection of sailing books. But as Patricia's health improved, so did her determination to reassert control. It manifested in small ways at first. Suggestions about Lily's schedule, observations about our parenting choices, comments about my work hours. "Is it really necessary for you to be on your computer so much, Daniel?" she asked one evening. "Family time is so precious, especially during these early years." I bit back the obvious response that my work was what provided for our family, allowed us the flexibility to be here helping them. Instead, I simply replied, "I've actually reduced my hours considerably while we're here, Patricia." She made a non-committal sound and turned her attention to Emma. "Darling, I've been thinking about Lily's education. It's not too early to get on waiting lists for the right preschools. Westlake Academy starts accepting applications at 18 months. Mom, Lily's barely walking, Emma said with forced patience. We haven't decided on preschool options yet. That's my point, Patricia pressed. The best schools have waiting lists years long. The Wilson name still carries weight, but only if we use it at the right time. Emma and I exchanged glances. The we wasn't lost on either of us. The assumption that decisions about Lily's education would be made collectively, with Patricia's input weighted equally to our own. As days turned into weeks, the pattern intensified. Patricia found ways to insert herself into every aspect of our daily lives. She rearranged Lily's clothing in the makeshift nursery, claiming she was organizing. She scheduled a photographer for family portraits without consulting us. She invited friends over to meet Lily, presenting her proudly as my granddaughter, the next generation of Wilsons. Each incident built upon the last, creating a mounting tension that became increasingly difficult to navigate, while maintaining the peace necessary for Patricia's recovery. The breaking point came 3 weeks into our extended stay. I was in the kitchen with Lily, while Emma helped Richard with some paperwork in his study. Patricia entered, moving more confidently now than she had since her TIA. There you are, she said, though whether she was addressing me or Lily wasn't entirely clear. I've just had the most wonderful call with Barbara Phillips, her grandson. James is about Lily's age. Such a delightful boy, from an excellent family. I've arranged a play date for tomorrow afternoon. I paused in the middle of cutting apple slices for Lily's snack. A play date? Patricia, we already have plans tomorrow. We're taking Lily to the Children's Museum. She waved a dismissive hand. The museum will always be there. This is an opportunity to introduce Lily to the right sort of children. These early connections matter. The right sort? I repeated, keeping my voice level for Lily's sake. Patricia, she's one. Her playdate criteria are pretty simple. Other kids who don't bite and maybe share toys. You're being deliberately obtuse, Daniel, Patricia said, her tone sharpening. You know perfectly well what I mean. Social connections formed early last a lifetime. James's family is precisely the sort of influence Lily should have. I set down the knife and faced her directly. We decide who Lily spends time with, not you. Patricia's eyes narrowed. She is my granddaughter. I have every right. You have the privileges we extend to you as her grandparent, I interrupted, my patience finally fraying. Those don't include scheduling her social calendar without our knowledge or consent. She drew herself up, offense radiating from her posture. I am trying to give her advantages, opportunities that will benefit her throughout her life, the same opportunities I gave Emma. Emma is free to make her own choices now, I reminded her, as are we for Lily. And you think you know better than I do. A boy from nowhere, Michigan, with no connections, no understanding of the world. I've built for this family. There it was. The honest assessment Patricia had always held of me, usually concealed beneath layers of polite condescension. In her view, I remained fundamentally unsuitable, an outsider who had somehow tricked my way into her family. I know what's right for my daughter, I said quietly, conscious of Lily watching our exchange with wide eyes. And it isn't being maneuvered into friendships based on family pedigree. Patricia's face flushed with anger. You've always been threatened by what I can offer her. Opportunities you can't provide with your startup salary and middle-class background. Mom! Emma's voice cut through the tension. She stood in the doorway, shock evident on her face. What is going on? Patricia turned to her daughter, composure instantly restored. Just a small disagreement about Lily's schedule, darling. Nothing to worry about. It wasn't small, and it wasn't just about her schedule, I corrected, unwilling to let Patricia minimize what had happened. Your mother arranged a play date for Lily tomorrow without consulting us, then suggested I don't understand what's best for her because of my background. Emma's expression hardened. Is that true? Patricia sighed dramatically. You're both overreacting. I was simply trying to help, to provide opportunities. By going behind our backs, by insulting Daniel. Emma shook her head. That's not helping, Mom. That's controlling. I am not controlling, Patricia insisted, genuine indignation in her voice. Everything I do is for this family, for its future. If you can't appreciate that, we're leaving, Emma interrupted, her voice quiet but firm. Today, not in a week. Today. Patricia stared at her in disbelief. Don't be ridiculous. Where would you go? Your house has been closed up for weeks. Home, Emma said simply, where we make our own decisions, live by our own values, where our daughter isn't judged by her social connections before she can even form complete sentences. Emma, please. Patricia's tone shifted to pleading. I misspoke. I was just concerned. You know how much I care about Lily's future. I know you care, Emma acknowledged, but caring doesn't give you the right to undermine our parenting or insult my husband. Richard appeared in the doorway behind Emma, taking in the scene with a weary expression. What's happened? Before anyone could answer, Lily, who had been unusually quiet during the tense exchange, suddenly burst into tears. Loud, frightened, sobs that echoed through the kitchen. I lifted her immediately, murmuring reassurances as she buried her face against my shoulder. The sound of her crying seemed to penetrate the tension in a way nothing else could have. Patricia's face crumpled, the imperious matriarch suddenly replaced by a woman who looked her age, tired and sad. I never meant to upset her, she whispered. Never her. Emma moved to stand beside us, one hand on Lily's back, the other finding mine. We know, Mom, but this isn't working for any of us. Patricia looked from Emma to me to Lily, who was still sniffling against my shoulder. For once, she seemed at a loss for words. Richard stepped forward. You should go home, he said quietly. This arrangement, it's not healthy for anyone. Patricia turned to him, betrayal written across her features. Richard! It's true, Patricia, he continued, a new firmness in his voice. We need help, yes, but not at the expense of their family, not at the cost of our relationship with our daughter and granddaughter. Something shifted in Patricia's expression, a recognition, perhaps, that the alliance she had always counted on was evolving. Richard was no longer her silent partner in maintaining control. He was asserting an independent perspective. Fine, she said finally, if that's what you all think is best. The defeat in her voice was so uncharacteristic that it almost made me doubt our decision. But then I felt Lily's small body still trembling against mine, heard Emma's resolute breathing beside me, and knew we were making the right choice. We packed quickly, explaining to Lily that we were going back to our own house, where her toys and familiar bed were waiting. She seemed to understand, her earlier distress replaced by excitement about returning home. As we loaded our bags into the car, Patricia watched from the doorway, her expression unreadable. At the last moment she approached Emma. I only ever wanted the best for you, she said softly. For all of you. Emma hugged her mother briefly. I know, but we need to decide what best means for our family. Patricia nodded, stepping back. Will you still visit? Of course, Emma assured her, just not like this, not living under the same roof. As we drove away, Emma was silent, staring out the window at the water view she'd grown up with. I reached across the center console to take her hand. You okay? She nodded slowly. I think so. It needed to happen. We can't live on her terms anymore. I glanced in the rearview mirror at Lily, already dozing in her car seat. No, we can't. We returned to our Queen Anne home, which felt simultaneously strange and deeply familiar after our weeks away. As we settled back into our space, our routines, I felt a tension I hadn't fully recognized begin to release from my shoulders. That evening, after Lily was asleep in her own room, surrounded by her familiar things, Emma and I sat on our small back deck, sharing a bottle of wine under the stars. "Do you think they'll be okay?" she asked. "Without us there?" "They managed for decades before we moved in," I reminded her, "and they have resources to get whatever help they need." She nodded, swirling her wine thoughtfully. "It's strange. When Mom had her TIA, I was terrified of losing her, but these past weeks, living there, it felt like I was losing something else, like we were losing something." "Our autonomy," I suggested. "Our family's identity." "Yes." She looked up at me, her eyes clear in the dim light. "I don't want to cut them off. They're still my parents, still Lily's grandparents, but we need boundaries. Real ones." "Agreed, and Richard seems more aware of that now too." Emma smiled, slightly. "I've never seen him stand up to her like that, not once in my entire life." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the distant sounds of the city, so different from the isolated quiet of Mercer Island. Finally, Emma spoke again. "I've been thinking about what Mom said, about your background, about what you can or can't provide for Lily." Her voice hardened. "It was cruel and wrong. You know that, right?" I nodded, though the words had stung more than I'd admitted. She was lashing out, trying to regain control. "Maybe, but it revealed how she still thinks of you. After all these years, all you've accomplished." Emma set down her wine glass decisively. "I don't want that poison anywhere near Lily, ever. I don't care what schools her friends go to or what connections they have. I care that she grows up knowing her worth isn't determined by her zip code or her social circle." I squeezed her hand. "She will, because that's the example we'll set for her." Emma leaned her head against my shoulder. "I just hope we can find a way to include my parents in her life without letting their values overshadow ours." It was a question I'd been pondering since we left the Wilson home, how to establish a relationship with Richard and Patricia that allowed them grandparent privileges without surrendering our authority as parents. The answer wasn't immediately clear, but I felt more confident in our ability to navigate it now that we were back on our own territory. "We'll figure it out," I promised. "One step at a time." What I couldn't have known then was how quickly and dramatically our careful plans would be tested, or how Patricia's next move would threaten not just our boundaries, but the very foundation of our marriage. 3 weeks after returning to our own home, life had settled into a new rhythm. Emma spoke with her parents regularly by phone, but we had not returned to the Sunday brunch tradition. Richard had visited once, bringing a stuffed dolphin for Lily and awkwardly offering apologies about how things ended during our stay. Patricia remained at home, citing fatigue from her physical therapy sessions. Work kept me busy. The acquisition of my startup had led to a new project developing security software that required intense focus. I was spending longer hours at the office, making up for the time I'd taken during our stay with Emma's parents. Emma understood, picking up more of the childcare duties while I navigated this critical professional phase. "It's just for a few weeks," I promised one night, as I packed up my laptop for an early morning meeting the next day. "Once we get past this launch, things will calm down." Emma smiled, though I could see the fatigue around her eyes. "It's okay. We're managing, and it's important work." Thursday afternoon, 3 days before the product launch, I was deep in code reviews when my phone rang. It was Maya, our nanny. "Mr. Cooper, I'm sorry to bother you at work, but Mrs. Wilson is here." I frowned, momentarily confused. "Emma is there?" "No, her mother. She arrived about 20 minutes ago to see Lily. She said she'd called ahead, but I didn't have her on the schedule." A small alarm bell rang in the back of my mind. Is everything okay? Yes, but... Maya lowered her voice. She's asking a lot of questions about your schedule, when you come home, if you ever work late. It seemed odd. The alarm bells grew louder. Where's Lily now? Napping. Mrs. Wilson is in the living room waiting for her to wake up. I'll be home in 20 minutes. Don't leave before I get there, okay? Of course not, Maya assured me, concern evident in her voice. I made hasty excuses to my team and drove home with a growing sense of unease. Patricia had never visited our home unannounced before. She'd always considered our Queen Anne house beneath her standards, too small and too far from the right neighborhoods. Her sudden interest, coupled with questions about my schedule, felt strategic rather than social. When I arrived, Patricia was sitting primly on our living room sofa, flipping through a home decorating magazine she must have brought with her. She looked up as I entered, surprise briefly crossing her face before she composed herself. Daniel, I didn't expect you home so early. Patricia, this is an unexpected visit. She set the magazine aside. I wanted to see my granddaughter. Is that a crime? Of course not, but usually people call first. I did call. Emma must have forgotten to mention it. I knew this was a lie. Emma and I maintained a shared family calendar precisely to avoid such misunderstandings. But I kept my expression neutral, unwilling to escalate the situation with Lily sleeping nearby. How are you feeling? You look well. Patricia touched her perfectly styled hair. Much better, thank you. The doctors are quite pleased with my progress. Maya appeared from the kitchen, clearly relieved to see me. Mr. Cooper, would you need anything before I go? No, thank you, Maya. We'll see you tomorrow. After she left, Patricia's gaze sharpened. That girl asks a lot of questions. Where did you find her? Through a reputable agency. She's excellent with Lily. She seems very, curious about your family arrangements. The implication hung in the air. I chose to ignore it. What brings you by today, Patricia, besides seeing Lily? She adjusted the sleeve of her cashmere sweater. Can't a grandmother visit without an interrogation? I've missed Lily, and Emma, of course. She glanced around. Where is my daughter, anyway? Client meeting. She should be home within the hour. Patricia nodded, her expression unreadable. You've been working long hours lately, I understand. So that's what this was about. We're launching a new product. It's a temporary situation. Emma mentioned you've had several business trips as well. Portland, was it? The specificity of the question caught me off guard. I had indeed made 2 day trips to Portland in the past month for meetings with a potential client. Yes, a few trips. Why do you ask? Patricia waved her hand dismissively. Just making conversation. Emma seemed concerned about your schedule. This was news to me. Emma had been supportive of my increased workload, understanding it was a short-term necessity. She hasn't mentioned any concerns to me. Well, she wouldn't, would she? Emma has always kept her worries to herself. Patricia leaned forward, slightly, a characteristic she developed early. As a child, she'd rather suffer in silence than admit something was wrong. I recognized the tactic. Patricia was attempting to position herself as the authority on Emma, the one who truly understood her. It was a subtle undermining of my relationship with my wife, suggesting there were aspects of Emma I couldn't access that Patricia inherently knew. Emma and I communicate openly, I said firmly. If she had concerns, she'd share them with me. Patricia smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. Of course. I'm simply observing that daughters often protect their husbands from their darker thoughts. It's an instinct. Before I could respond, we heard Lily's voice over the baby monitor, chattering to herself as she woke from her nap. Patricia stood immediately. I'll get her. "I've got it," I said, moving toward the stairs. We retrieved Lily together, an awkward dance of competing grandparental and parental rights. Lily was delighted to see her grandmother, reaching for Patricia with genuine enthusiasm that softened something in my chest, despite my suspicions. The rest of the visit passed in superficial pleasantries. Patricia asked more questions about my work schedule, my trips to Portland, whether I ever stayed overnight, all framed as casual interest but delivered with an undercurrent I couldn't quite identify. When Emma arrived home, Patricia embraced her warmly, as if their last interaction hadn't ended in our abrupt departure from her home. "Mom, this is a surprise," Emma said, shooting me a questioning look over Patricia's shoulder. "A happy one, I hope," Patricia replied. "I've had a wonderful visit with Lily and Daniel." After Patricia left, promising to do this again soon, Emma turned to me with raised eyebrows. "What was that about? She didn't mention any plans to visit when we spoke yesterday." I recounted the afternoon, including Maya's call and Patricia's questions about my schedule. It felt deliberate, like she was fishing for something. Emma frowned. "That's weird. She asked me similar questions last week about your hours, your trips, whether you ever worked weekends. And you didn't think that was strange?" "I thought she was trying to demonstrate interest in your career," Emma admitted. "Making an effort, you know, after everything that happened." I wasn't convinced. "Did you tell her I was concerned about my schedule?" "What? No." Emma looked genuinely confused. "Why would I say that?" "She implied you were worried about my long hours, that you'd expressed concerns to her." Emma shook her head firmly. "Absolutely not. I told her you were busy with a major launch, but that it was temporary and exciting for your career." I paced our living room, trying to make sense of Patricia's behavior. Why would she lie about that? What's the angle? Maybe there isn't. Emma suggested, though she sounded doubtful. Maybe she's just trying to reconnect and did it awkwardly. I wanted to believe that. But the calculated nature of Patricia's questions, the unannounced visit when she knew Emma wouldn't be home, it felt like the opening move in a strategy, not a clumsy attempt at reconciliation. The following week confirmed my suspicions. I returned home late Tuesday evening after a successful product demonstration to find Emma unusually quiet, her responses to my excited recap of the day's achievements minimal and distracted. "Everything okay?" I asked as we prepared for bed. She hesitated, then sat on the edge of our bed. "My mother called again today. And she asked if we could have lunch tomorrow, just the two of us. She said she needs to talk to me about something important, something concerning you." The vague sense of unease I'd felt since Patricia's visit solidified into dread. Did she say what it was about? No, just that she's worried and needs to speak with me privately. Emma looked up at me, conflict evident in her expression. "I told her I'd meet her." I sat beside her. "You don't need my permission to have lunch with your mother." "I know, but after everything, I feel like I should be suspicious of her." "Motives?" "Probably," I agreed, "but avoiding her won't tell us what she's planning. Better to know what we're dealing with." Emma nodded, leaning against my shoulder. "That's what I thought too." The next day, I found it hard to concentrate on work. I kept checking my phone, waiting for word from Emma about her lunch with Patricia. When it reached 3 p.m. with no message, I texted her. "How did it go?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "Still with Mom. Talk later." The brevity and delay of her response heightened my anxiety. When I arrived home that evening, Emma's car wasn't in the driveway. Maya greeted me at the door with Lily on her hip. "Mrs. Cooper called to say she'd be late," she informed me. "She asked if I could stay until 8. "Did she say why she'd be late?" Maya shook her head. "Just that something came up with her mother." By 8:30, with Maya gone and Lily asleep, I was pacing our living room, concern morphing into worry. I'd called Emma 3 times with no answer, just her voicemail greeting. I was considering calling Richard when I heard her key in the lock. Emma entered looking exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. She set down her purse and keys with deliberate care. "Emma, what happened?" "I've been worried sick." And she looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "My mother thinks you're having an affair." The absurdity of the accusation might have made me laugh, if not for the devastated look on Emma's face. "What? That's ridiculous. She says she has evidence, photos of you with another woman in Portland." The pieces suddenly clicked into place. Patricia's questions about my schedule, her focus on my trips to Portland, the unannounced visit to gather intelligence from Maya. She'd been building a case. "Emma, you know that's not true. I've never been unfaithful to you, not once, not ever." She didn't respond immediately, which felt like a knife to my chest. Was she actually considering the possibility? "She showed me pictures," Emma said finally, her voice flat. "You entering an apartment building with a woman, your arm around her waist, in Portland last Thursday." I struggled to make sense of this. I had been in Portland last Thursday, meeting with the development team at our new partner company, but I certainly hadn't entered any apartment building with a woman. "Emma, whoever she showed you, it wasn't me. I was in Portland for work meetings. You knew about that trip." "I know." She rubbed her temples. "The man in the photos looks like you. Same build, similar hair. But the quality isn't great. Taken from a distance." Relief flooded me. She wasn't convinced by the supposed evidence. "It's not me. Your mother is either mistaken or deliberately trying to mislead you." Emma sank onto the couch. "That's what I said. That the photos weren't conclusive. That I trust you." She looked up at me, pain evident in her eyes. That's when she brought out the rest. The rest! Credit card statements showing hotel charges for 2 when you were supposed to be alone. Phone records with calls to the same number, always late at night. A receipt for jewelry I've never seen. My mind raced. None of this made sense. My company covered hotel expenses for business trips. I hadn't purchased jewelry recently. And late-night calls. I typically collapsed into bed after long workdays, barely managing to check in with Emma before falling asleep. "Emma, none of that is real. It has to be fabricated." "I know," she whispered. "At least, I think I know." But she was so certain, Daniel, so convinced. She had these files, organized with dates and times. It looked official. I sat beside her, taking her hands in mine. "Your mother has gone to extraordinary lengths before to control your life. Remember the school applications she filled out without telling you? The job interviews she arranged. This is the same pattern, just more extreme." Emma nodded slowly. "That's what I told myself. But then she mentioned things, details about your schedule, your habits, that she shouldn't know. Like how you always call to check in around 6 p.m. when you're traveling, or that you've been staying late at the office on Thursdays, specifically." A chill ran through me. Those details were accurate, but I hadn't shared them with Patricia. How would she know that? "That's what scared me," Emma admitted. "The level of detail felt invasive, like she's been watching you, watching us." I stood, agitation making it impossible to sit still. What exactly is she accusing me of? Just an affair? Or something more? Emma's expression tightened. "She says you have another woman in Portland, someone you've been seeing for months. She implied it might be serious." "And you believe her?" "No," Emma said quickly, then hesitated. "But I don't understand how she would know those details about your schedule, or why she would go to such lengths if there wasn't something to find." The doubt in her voice, however small, was devastating. After everything we'd been through, the possibility that Emma could question my faithfulness, even momentarily, felt like a fundamental fracture in our foundation. Emma, I have never cheated on you. I would never cheat on you. Whatever your mother thinks she's found, it's either a misunderstanding or a deliberate fabrication. She nodded, wiping at her eyes. I want to believe that. I do believe that. But she seemed so certain, and the evidence looked so thorough. Evidence can be manufactured, I pointed out, especially by someone with resources and determination. I know. She looked up at me, vulnerability naked in her expression. Will you show me your phone and your credit card statements? I hate asking. I hate that she's made me doubt even for a second, but I need to know for sure. Her request stung, but I understood the position Patricia had put her in. Of course, you can see anything you want. I have nothing to hide. We spent the next hour going through my phone, my email, my credit card statements. The hotel charges Patricia had mentioned didn't exist. The late-night calls were to my development team during crunch time, all documented in our work chat logs. The jewelry receipt was nowhere to be found. She made it all up, Emma said finally, a mixture of relief and horror in her voice. All of it. The photos must be of someone else, someone who looks like you from a distance. I nodded, though a troubling question remained. But how did she know those specific details about my schedule, about when I call you from trips? Emma frowned. I have no idea. I certainly didn't tell her. A thought occurred to me, uncomfortable, invasive, but increasingly plausible. Let me see your phone. Emma handed it over without hesitation. I opened her settings and navigated to the list of applications, scanning for anything unfamiliar. Nothing stood out immediately. Then I checked her location sharing settings and found something concerning. Emma, you're sharing your location with your mother. She looked surprised. What? No, I'm not. I showed her the screen where Patricia Wilson was listed under location sharing with always selected. I didn't authorize that, Emma said, taking the phone to examine it more closely. I would never have given her constant access to my location. When did she last have access to your phone? Emma thought for a moment. During our stay, maybe? Or at lunch today, she asked to see recent photos of Lily. That would have been enough time to enable location sharing, I pointed out. And if she has your location, she knows when you're home, when you're at work, when you're alone. She could use that information to build a narrative about my schedule. Emma looked ill. But that doesn't explain the photos or how she would fabricate credit card statements. I paced our living room, thinking through the possibilities. The photos could be of anyone with a similar build and coloring. As for the financial documents, they could be completely fabricated. Or, a darker thought occurred to me. Your father has access to financial resources. Could she have hired someone, a private investigator, to follow you, to fake evidence? Emma shook her head in disbelief. That seems extreme even for her. Does it? Think about how desperately she's tried to control your life, our life. Think about how she reacted when we left their house, when we established boundaries. This could be her nuclear option. Emma was quiet for a long moment. If you're right, if she's gone this far, what does she expect to happen? That I'll leave you? Take Lily and move back in with them? Probably, I said quietly. That's been her endgame all along, bringing you back into their world, raising Lily according to Wilson traditions and expectations. A rift between us serves that purpose. Emma's expression hardened. We need to confront her together. I want to know exactly how far she's gone and why. I shook my head. Not yet. If she has hired someone, if she's actively manufacturing evidence, we need to know what we're dealing with first. What are you suggesting? We gather our own evidence, document the fabrications, maybe even find out who she hired, if anyone. I squeezed her hand. And we need to be careful about what we say and where we say it. If she accessed your phone once, she might have done more than enable location sharing. Emma's eyes widened with realization. You think she's monitoring my calls, my texts? I think we need to consider the possibility. We spent the rest of the evening combing through our digital lives, looking for signs of intrusion or surveillance. We found several concerning indications. Emma's email had been accessed from an unfamiliar device, her cloud storage showed login activity from Mercer Island, and her phone had several apps with unexplained permissions. I feel violated, Emma whispered as we catalogued each discovery. How could she do this? How could she invade our privacy this way? I had no comforting answer. The depth of Patricia's apparent invasion surpassed anything I had imagined possible. This wasn't just manipulation or control, it was a calculated attempt to destroy our marriage based on manufactured evidence. The next morning, Emma called in sick to work, too shaken by our discoveries to face colleagues. I worked from home, unwilling to leave her alone. Around noon, her phone rang with a call from Patricia. Put it on speaker, I whispered, but remember, act normal. We don't want her to know we're onto her. Emma nodded, taking a deep breath before answering. Hi, Mom. Emma, darling. I've been thinking about you all morning. How are you? I'm okay, Emma replied, her voice admirably steady, just processing everything. I know it's difficult, sweetheart. Finding out someone you trust has betrayed you, it's devastating, but you're strong, just like me. You'll get through this. The casual certainty with which Patricia discussed my non-existent betrayal made my blood boil. But I remained silent, listening. Mom, about those photos, Emma began carefully. I've been thinking, they're not very clear. Are you sure it's Daniel? Patricia's voice sharpened. Of course it's Daniel. Who else would it be? Emma, don't let denial cloud your judgment. The evidence is clear. Evidence can be misinterpreted, Emma said mildly, or manufactured. A pause. What are you implying? Nothing, Mom. I'm just trying to make sense of this. It's a lot to process. Patricia's tone softened again. Of course it is, darling. That's why I think you should come stay with us for a while, just until you decide what to do. Bring Lily, of course. The East Wing is all ready for you both. The invitation confirmed my suspicions. This entire charade was designed to fracture our marriage and bring Emma back under Patricia's roof and influence. Thanks, Mom, but I need to think about this. I can't just pack up and leave. Emma, Patricia's voice took on an edge of impatience. You can't possibly stay there with him, knowing what he's done. What kind of example would that set for Lily? I need time, Emma repeated firmly. I'll call you tomorrow, okay? After hanging up, Emma turned to me, her expression a mixture of anger and resolve. She really thinks I'll just abandon our marriage based on some blurry photos and fabricated documents, that I'll run back to her like a child. Because that's how she still sees you, I pointed out, as someone to be guided and protected, not as an adult capable of making your own judgments. What now? Emma asked, her voice steadier than it had been since returning from lunch with her mother. How do we prove what she's done? I considered our options. We need professional help. Someone who can document the digital intrusions, trace the origin of the fabricated evidence, maybe even identify who took those photos. A private investigator of our own, Emma concluded. Fighting fire with fire. Exactly. Within hours, we had engaged a digital security expert recommended by my company's legal team. Keith Harmon was a former FBI cyber investigator who now specialized in cases of digital stalking, evidence tampering, and privacy violations. He arrived at our Home that evening, a tall man with a quiet demeanor that inspired immediate confidence. "So you believe your mother-in-law has been monitoring your devices, potentially fabricating evidence of infidelity, and possibly employing someone to follow Mr. Cooper," he summarized after we explained the situation. "Yes," Emma confirmed. "It sounds paranoid when you say it out loud, but—" "Not paranoid at all," Keith interrupted. "I see cases like this more often than you'd think. Family disputes can motivate extraordinary violations of privacy." He began a thorough examination of our devices, using specialized software to detect surveillance applications and unauthorized access. Within an hour, he'd confirmed our worst fears. "Mrs. Cooper, your phone has spyware installed," he explained, showing us the evidence on his laptop screen. "It's sophisticated, designed to be invisible to casual users. It captures texts, emails, phone calls, even ambient audio when the phone is apparently inactive." Emma looked ill. "So she's been listening to our conversations, reading my private messages." "Potentially, yes. The software has been active for approximately 3 weeks. Keith turned to me. "Mr. Cooper, your devices appear clean, but if Mrs. Cooper's phone was present during your conversations at home, then Patricia would have heard them," I finished, "including discussions about my work schedule, my trips to Portland." Keith nodded. "Exactly. And with this level of information, creating convincing fabricated evidence would be relatively straightforward, especially for someone with resources." "Can you trace who installed it?" Emma asked. "Prove it was my mother." "That will take more time," Keith cautioned, "but based on the access timestamps and IP addresses, I can confirm the monitoring has occurred primarily from a location on Mercer Island. Is that consistent with your mother's residence?" Emma nodded grimly. "That's where they live." Keith continued his investigation, examining Emma's email accounts, cloud storage, and social media for signs of intrusion. The picture that emerged was disturbing. A systematic campaign of digital surveillance that had begun shortly after our departure from the Wilson home. "And the photos?" I asked. "The ones supposedly showing me with another woman?" Keith examined. "The prints Emma had brought home from her lunch with Patricia. These are deliberately low quality," he observed. "Grainy, taken from a distance. Classic technique when you want to suggest something without providing clear evidence." He looked up at me. "When were you last in Portland?" "Last Thursday. A client meeting at their downtown office from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., then straight back to Seattle." He nodded thoughtfully. "Would you be willing to provide your exact whereabouts? Credit card charges, building security logs, anything that would establish your movements?" "Absolutely. Whatever you need." By midnight, Keith had established a preliminary timeline of the surveillance and potential evidence tampering. He believed Patricia had likely hired a private investigator around the time of her TIA, possibly using Richard's business contacts. "The approach is professional," he explained. "The spyware, the systematic information gathering, the creation of plausible but deniable evidence, these aren't amateur tactics." "What do we do now?" Emma asked, exhaustion evident in her voice. "First, we secure your devices and accounts," Keith said firmly. "Change all passwords, enable two-factor authentication, perform factory resets on your phones. Then we document everything, the surveillance, the fabricated evidence, the manipulation attempts." "And then," I prompted. Keith's expression was grave. "Then you decide how to proceed. You could pursue legal action, invasion of privacy, defamation, possibly even stalking charges. Or you could confront her with the evidence and establish boundaries with legal consequences if they're violated." Emma and I exchanged glances. "We need time to think about that part," she said finally. After Keith left, promising to continue his investigation and provide a comprehensive report within days, Emma and I sat in our kitchen, the gravity of the situation settling over us. I always knew my mother was controlling, Emma said quietly. But this, spying on us, fabricating evidence, it's beyond anything I imagined her capable of. I reached across the table to take her hand. The important thing is that we know the truth. Whatever she was hoping to accomplish, it didn't work. Emma squeezed my hand, but her expression remained troubled. It almost did, though. For a few hours yesterday, I let her plant seeds of doubt. About you, about us, if the evidence had been better, if she'd been more convincing. She trailed off. But it wasn't, and you weren't convinced, I reminded her. You trusted me enough to come home, to talk to me, to look for the truth together. She nodded slowly. I just keep thinking, what if we hadn't discovered the spyware? What if she'd been more careful? How far would she have gone with this? It was a chilling thought. If Patricia was willing to fabricate evidence of infidelity, to invade our privacy so completely, what other boundaries might she cross? The question hung between us, unanswered but urgent. We need to protect ourselves, I said finally. And Lily, whatever we decide to do about your mother, our family's security comes first. I know, Emma agreed, but confronting her feels terrifying. Not physically, but emotionally. This is so beyond normal mother-daughter conflict. It's pathological. I understood her hesitation. Confronting Patricia meant acknowledging that her mother wasn't just controlling or difficult, but willing to destroy her daughter's marriage based on lies. It was a devastating reality to face. We don't have to decide everything tonight, I assured her. Let's wait for Keith's complete report. Think through our options carefully. Emma nodded, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. Okay, but there's one thing I am decided on. Her eyes met mine, resolute despite her fatigue. I won't let her destroy what we've built. Not our marriage, not our family, not our trust in each other. As we prepared for bed that night, the weight of Patricia's betrayal hung heavy between us. But alongside it was a growing determination to protect our family, to establish consequences for her actions, and to ensure she could never again threaten the foundation of our life together. What we couldn't know then was that Patricia was already planning her next move, one that would force a confrontation sooner than we anticipated, and with far higher stakes than either of us had imagined possible. The morning after our meeting, with Keith, Emma's phone rang. It was Richard, his voice uncharacteristically urgent. Emma, you need to come to the house, now. It's your mother. What's happened? Is she okay? She's fine physically, but you just need to come, please. Emma looked at me, concern etched across her face. Should I go? I hesitated. After everything we'd discovered, walking into Patricia's domain felt dangerous, but Richard's call seemed genuine, his worry palpable even through the phone. I'll come with you, I said firmly. We'll face this together. We arranged for Maya to watch Lily and drove to Mercer Island in tense silence. What awaited us at the Wilson home? Another elaborate trap? Or had Patricia's machinations finally reached a breaking point? Richard met us at the door, looking haggard. Thank you for coming. She's in the sunroom. We followed him through the familiar corridors to find Patricia seated rigidly on her favorite chair, surrounded by stacks of folders and printouts. Her normally impeccable appearance was disheveled, her eyes feverish with a strange intensity. Emma, she said, her voice brittle, I didn't expect him to come too. We're a package deal, Mom. What's going on? Patricia gestured to the materials surrounding her. I've been gathering evidence, building the case. It's all here, everything you need to understand what he's done. Emma approached cautiously. What are these? Proof, Patricia insisted. Irrefutable proof that Daniel has betrayed you. Look, she thrust a folder forward. Phone records showing calls to the same Portland number for months. Credit card statements with hotel charges for 2. photos of them together. The same fabricated evidence she'd shown Emma before, now expanded into what appeared to be a full investigation. My stomach tightened as I recognized the obsessive thoroughness of Patricia's delusion, or her deception. "Mom," Emma said gently, "we know about the spyware on my phone. We know you've been monitoring my calls, my messages. We know the evidence is fabricated." Patricia's expression flickered, momentary confusion replaced by indignation. "That's absurd. I would never spy on my own daughter." "We have proof," I said quietly. "Digital forensics don't lie, Patricia." Richard stepped forward. "What are they talking about, Patricia?" She waved dismissively. "They're trying to distract from the real issue, Daniel's infidelity." "There is no infidelity," Emma stated firmly. "The man in those photos isn't Daniel. The phone records and credit card statements are fakes." Patricia's composure began to crack. "You're blind, Emma, blind to what's right in front of you, just like you've always been blind to the fact that you married beneath you." Her voice rose. "I tried to guide you. I tried to protect you from making these mistakes, but you wouldn't listen." Richard placed a hand on his wife's shoulder. "Patricia, calm down. Whatever you think you found, I didn't find it," she snapped, shrugging off his touch. "Davidson found it, the investigator you hired." Richard's face drained of color. "I never hired an investigator." "Of course you did," Patricia insisted. "After her TIA, to make sure Daniel was suitable to help with my recovery." "Patricia, I did no such thing." Richard looked genuinely shocked. "Did you hire someone without telling me?" Her expression faltered. It was necessary to protect Emma, to protect our family." The room fell silent as the truth emerged. Patricia had unilaterally hired an investigator, presumably instructing him to find evidence of my unfaithfulness, whether it existed or not. "How long?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How long have you been having me followed? Having Daniel followed?" Patricia's chin lifted defiantly. "Since before the wedding. Different investigators over the years, just to be certain he wasn't taking advantage." Emma staggered as if physically struck. 6 years? You've been spying on us for 6 years? I caught her elbow, steadying her. My mind raced, recalibrating our entire relationship with Patricia through this new lens. Every gathering, every conversation, every interaction potentially monitored, reported back, analyzed for weaknesses. "Why?" Richard asked, staring at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. "Why would you do this?" "To protect what we've built," Patricia said, an edge of desperation entering her voice. "The Wilson legacy, our position." Emma was throwing it all away on someone who could never understand our world, never truly belong in it. "That wasn't your decision to make," Emma said, finding her voice again. "It was mine, my choice, my life." Patricia's expression hardened. "You're my daughter. Everything I've done has been for your benefit." "No," Emma countered, a new strength in her tone. "It's been for your benefit, for your vision of what my life should be, not for me, not for what actually makes me happy." I watched Patricia's face as Emma's words penetrated. For a fleeting moment, confusion, and perhaps even genuine hurt, flickered across her features. Then the mask of righteous certainty returned. "You'll see I was right," she said coldly. "When he leaves you, when he reveals his true nature." Emma shook her head, a mixture of sadness and resolution in her expression. "Mom, the only person revealing their true nature here is you." She turned to her father. "Dad, we're leaving. I can't. We can't be around this anymore." Richard nodded, looking years older than when we'd arrived. "I understand. I'm so sorry, Emma. I had no idea." "What will you do?" I asked him quietly. He glanced at Patricia, who was gathering her evidence with trembling hands, muttering about ungrateful children and willful blindness. "I don't know," he admitted. "But something has to change." As we drove home, Emma was silent, tears streaming down her face. I reached across the center console to take her hand. "I'm so sorry," I said, inadequate words for the magnitude of betrayal she'd experienced. "All these years," she whispered. "Every milestone we shared with her, our engagement, our wedding, Lily's birth, she was watching, judging, waiting for you to fail." "But I didn't," I reminded her gently. "We didn't." A week later, Keith delivered his final report, documenting the extent of Patricia's surveillance. Emma made the difficult decision to seek a restraining order, legally barring her mother from contacting us or coming near our home or Lily's daycare. Richard called once to inform us that Patricia had agreed to begin therapy, not because she believed she needed help, but because Emma had made it a condition of any future relationship. It was a small step, uncertain in its sincerity, but necessary for any hope of reconciliation. 3 months passed. We moved to a new home across the city, changed our phone numbers, created new email accounts. Slowly, the weight of Patricia's betrayal began to lift, allowing us to focus on rebuilding our sense of security and trust. On Lily's 2nd birthday, a package arrived, delivered through Richard to respect the restraining order's terms. Inside was a silver frame containing a photo of Emma as a toddler, standing beside a dollhouse that had been in the Wilson family for generations. A note in Richard's handwriting explained that Patricia wanted Lily to have the dollhouse when she was old enough to appreciate it. "No strings attached," the note concluded. "Her therapist suggests meaningful gestures without expectations." Emma traced the photo's edge, emotion playing across her face. "What do you think?" I considered carefully. "I think it's a first step, a small one." "Not the dollhouse," Emma clarified. "Us. Do we let her back into our lives eventually? Into Lily's life?" I pulled her close. "That's your decision. Whatever you choose, I'll support you." She leaned into me, watching Lily play with her birthday presents nearby. "Family is complicated," she said softly, "but I want Lily to know her grandmother, the person beneath the control and manipulation, if that person still exists. And if she doesn't," Emma's expression turned resolute, "then we'll have done everything we could. The rest is up to her." That evening, as we celebrated our daughter's birthday with friends who had become our chosen family, I reflected on the journey we'd traveled. Patricia's attempt to destroy our marriage had instead forced us to confront the unhealthy dynamics that had shadowed us from the beginning, to establish boundaries that should have existed years ago. Our family was stronger now, not despite Patricia's machinations, but because of what they had revealed about our capacity to trust each other, to stand together against manipulation, to choose each other deliberately and with clear eyes. The road ahead remained uncertain. Patricia's path to genuine change would be long and might never reach its destination. But our path was clear, forward, together, on our own terms. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all. Up. Next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.